Probably getting stakeholders to the table. One of the things that you really need to do to make a standard that will be used by people is getting the right people around the table who will be the users of the standard as well as the people who will be impacted by the subject that you're discussing. And the larger the cross-section of experts you get from a larger group of countries, you get a broader perspective and you get to begin to understand what are the factors that you want to deal with in writing the standard and having this group of people to bounce ideas off of each other. And the bottom line is different individuals, different consultants in any one country have different ways of looking at solving a problem. There is no one solution. And then you look at the cultural differences between countries and the way people think differently, and you have a whole nother pool of ways of looking at how you do that problem solving. So the more countries, the more people you bring together to look at these problems and think of how to solve these problems, the more you learn from each other and the stronger standard you come up with, because hopefully from that you'll be able to come up with what are best practices defined in a generic enough way that people can use it as a problem-solving tool rather than a recipe. One of the things I like, pointing to a good standard is more like an Italian recipe than an English or an American recipe, where in a well-written standard, it's telling you what you need and giving you the general things to think about, what you put in the dish that you're preparing, but it doesn't dictate to you that you need 10 milliliters of this and a gram of that. You put it together so it fits the culture of your organization and the culture of the society that you're working in, rather than the approach that you see in an English recipe or an American recipe, which tells you you need exactly 10 mils of this and you need 2 grams of that. So it really, a good standard will take the different views of people so you come up with that general what you need to do, and they can tailor the how to their business model and to the culture that they're applying this. There's less differences, I think, than what people perceive. I work for ASIS International, so it's an international society of security professionals, and I would say 50% of my time is traveling around the world meeting with different chapters. And the commonalities between the way people look at things in terms of identifying the risks and thinking of how you analyze the risk and treat the risks in many ways is similar in different parts of the world. The differences become in the way their governments perceive how risks need to be dealt with, and also the differences in culture of the different societies, of how much risk they're used to bearing, and do they live in a very risk-averse society, or they live in a society that's willing to accept risks. And that changes the way they perceive things and the way they apply things. In terms of standards, the Europeans, the Australians, and the Asians are usually much more open to the idea of standards and using standards as tools for managing their businesses. Where Americans have this aversion to standards, that they have this perception that standards are almost like regulation from government and they don't like them. But I think once people become comfortable and realize that they're using standards and they're not being forced upon them, but they can use them to improve their business management, I think they're much more accepting. But usually the pecking order is it's outside the United States, they get comfortable with the standards first, and then the US begins to pick them up.